Welcome to Chronicles of Old Singapore. This is Dr Loh KS, the people's historian, and I speak to people on their memories of Singapore before it became a global city. Do like the video and subscribe for future episodes. This will help us a lot. We're in for a treat today because we have a guest with us who's many things. She's a grandmother. She's a established author and historian. She is a great cook in the kitchen. I think most of all, she's also a member of the Ceylonese Tamil community and one of the prominent people in the community, one of the most active people in the community. Let me welcome today, this morning, Indra Iswaran. Indra, how are you this morning?
Very well, thank you. Already and going.
I must first thank Chalva and Muthi, two members of the Ceylonese Tamil community as well, who are very passionate about the history and the culture of their community, who introduced Indra to me and suggested her as a guest. You know, I have been covering the different Indian communities in Singapore over the last few weeks and months. As most of you would know, the Indians of Singapore are not just one community, but they are made up of diverse communities with their own distinct languages, histories, traditions, cultures, and so on. And is very much like the Chinese and the Malays of Singapore as well. So I'm very happy to have someone speak authoritatively and passionately about one of these communities. I think it's a very small community, but a very prominent one in Singapore history. Let me first invite Indra to kind of introduce herself as a member of the community. Indra?
Hi, good morning.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for including me in this
Not at all.
awesome,
Not at all.
podcast. I'm very happy to be a part of it. I was born in Ipoh, and I got married at the age of 17 and came across to Singapore. I married a Singaporean. And at that time, when I married my husband, he was just about to leave to go and do his postgraduate in Oxford. So I accompanied him to go out there. So as a 17-year-old, very raw, very much a convent girl who didn't know much about anything, and from a very protected family. It was interesting that my dad, he's very outgoing and modern, but it was interesting that he allowed me to be married at such a young age. But my parents did not have children for 15 years, so I was the firstborn. And after me, I have two sisters who are younger than me. When I was in Oxford, I had to find my own way around because my husband was very busy with his studies and was involved in also doing some work at the hospitals. So I had to find my way of occupying myself. My dream was always to be a textile designer, but that dream was never fulfilled. I had a place at the textile design school in Manchester, but unfortunately, marriage came into the way. But fortunately for me, something else took my interest, and that was going into the libraries in Oxford, because I think that's the best repositories for working on history, archaeology, and all of that. So I read a lot. And that is how my early beginnings of my interest in, particularly in Hindu architecture and in Indian history and the Southeast Asian history, blossomed for me.
Let me just jump in with a quick question, right? Because you don't look it. But when were you born and how old are you now?
I'm 75 plus. I'm going to be 76. Maybe I'll tell you a little bit about my forefathers.
Yes.
So if you go back in history, I could date or I could trace my own ancestries in this region back to 1790s during the time of Francis Light. My great-great-grandfather and my great-grandfather were traders, and they used to ply between Ceylon, actually Jaffna from Mannar area, to south to the Malay archipelago. And they used to trade in rice and spices as well as tobacco. Tobacco in the place that my great-great-grandfather and great-grandfather were, tobacco was very famous. They grew a special tobacco that they made cigars out of, and that was popular and was sold in the markets of Burma and Malaya as well. And what they took back with them were the spices that were available here, which was like cloves, cinnamon. I mean, cinnamon was there as well, but there is a different cinnamon bark. You know, there are cinnamon, and cinnamon, as we say. So there's cloves. There was anise that came from China that was exchanged here, and then nutmeg, of course. And all these spices were, plied back and forth. Yeah, and rice. So eventually, my great-great-grandfather was invited, like many other traders, to start the settlements in Malaya. And my great-great-grandfather and great-grandfather were interested because where they were going to settle, which was the Krian district in Perak, and there was a lot of rice fields. It was rich and very fertile. And it was similar to Jaffna. So they decided to settle down in this area called Bagansarai in Perak, just slightly upriver from Port Weld. And so this was how the beginnings of my forefathers was. So 1790s, then the next lot was my grandfather, my paternal grandfather and my maternal grandfather, who were brought in by the British in 1890s, almost 100 years on. They then came to this region. My paternal grandfather was an overseer, and he was in charge of all the roads that was to be built. The British were busy trying to develop Perak area because that was basically where the first developments had started. And my maternal grandfather was a doctor, and he was in charge of the labor force hospitals, and his first plantation that he was working at as a doctor was at Batugaja. And that was where my mother was born. My father was born in Ipoh in 1900. My grandmother, my paternal grandmother and my maternal grandmother, but particularly my paternal grandmother, Minachi, was one of the first women that came from Jaffna to Malaya. Because before that, none of the women traveled. Their wives were always left in Jaffna, and the husbands came out to do the trading. And I must mention one very interesting thing that my father told me, that my great-great-grandfather and my great-great-grandfather both had a little house on the prairie, as I would say. So they had somebody who they kept as to look after them in this part of the world. So my great-great-grandfather had a Banjarmasin woman whom he didn't marry, but he had her as his keep, as they say. And then my great-grandfather was married or had a woman who was of Persian mix. And this was known by my dad. It was related to him by my grandfather, but he never really got to know who they were. And he said to me that whenever we used to travel to Penang or up north,
Mm.
when we passed Bagansrai, he always used to tell me, he said, a lot of this land, where the fields are, part of it, your forefathers had properties here. And I used to admire those fields, beautiful green fields of rice. And he used to say, I'm sure we had family whom are sort of related to us, like half brothers or half sisters, but we don't know who they are because that was never made known in Jaffna. They knew that they had some form of half sister or half brothers or anything, but they were never introduced to them. And that was an interesting aspect. So when I went back to Jaffna to visit my maternal grandmother, who was the only one surviving at the time when I went back to the village, I remember a lot of the elders in the village that came round. It was important because anyone who came around, it was important that they gathered to meet. And my grandmother was quite a strong personality in that village, my maternal grandmother. And when she cooked, everyone in the village would know because the smell of the grinding of the spices and the aromas that went across over the lanes, they would know that somebody has come. And so they would all come to have a visit and inquire, like typical old, village elders, now who has come, what is this? And, that's when I realized that some of the elder women would like say, oh, who's your mother and who's your father, sort of thing.
Yeah.
They sort of knew, but they wanted to get assurance that we were actually belonging to that clan, and we were not from outside somewhere, or from the mixed marriage or mixed liaisons.
Right.
So this is a very interesting part of our community.
Yes. You mentioned the cooking, right? So I guess that's where you got your cooking genes from, right?
Well, when I got married, interestingly enough, when I got married, I didn't know how to cook a bean. I really didn't know. I didn't know the front end of a ladle to the back end of a wok because my parents never allowed me into the kitchen. As I said, I was the eldest, born after 15 years. But my two sisters were much more fortunate than me. They were allowed to come into the kitchen and, mess around with my mom. But myself, no, my father would never allow me into the kitchen. But the one thing that my father did, which I am so grateful for, is to take me to the markets. Every day, my father would go to the market to buy the groceries for the day. In those days, my father was very particular about fresh food. So fish or chicken or vegetables had to be freshly bought for that day. So we would go to get the fresh produce. I was all of 4 when my dad used to, first of all, wake me up very early in the morning, take me out for a walk. And we used to walk around the military camp for 1 hour. And I used to hang on to him because it was so dark and so, alien out there, in the darkness. But I would hang on to him, onto his walking stick for that matter. And then we'd get back home and he would have a cup of tea. And by 6 o'clock, we would leave for the markets. And and it was a wet market. So we would plod along around the market. He would pick up the vegetables, he'd pick up the chicken or the fish or whatever he wanted to buy for the day, and then bring it back home. And then he'd have his shower and everything, have his breakfast, do his prayers and whatever, have breakfast, and then go off to the office by 8. So this was the routine that we followed. And I learned this from my dad, how to choose the fish, by just observing him, choose the fresh fish and choose, of course, chicken nowadays is already ready slaughtered and brought to the market, so you can't. So it was a fish and the prawns and the seafood that I was very good at, being able to pick up. I think that was, it's not easy for many people to know this. Because nowadays the younger generation, they just go and just pick up whatever is packed
Yeah,
and
I
bring it
have
back.
no idea.
Yeah.
Can I just ask you? I've heard that you should look at the eyes. Is that right?
Yes. Eyes and the scales as well, and the gills. But you can see that when they put when you open the gills, sometimes they put blood into it. So people don't realize that you should turn the fish the other way and look at to the other side of the gills.
Right.
See, when they pack the fish into the eyes, you tend to just look at one side, but if you turn the other side, you'll see the grayness in it. So I always have followed my dad's lessons on this. So at
Can
least I know how to buy produce, and bring it home.
Yeah. Can I just get for the record, right?
Yes.
The names of your great grandfather, your two grandfathers, and your grandmother. Can I get their names?
Yes. Okay. My great great grandfather was Vinasi Thambi, and my great grandfather was Muthu Thambi, and my grandfather on the paternal side was Ilya Thambi. And my grandmother on my paternal side was Meenachi. And then my grandfather on my, I don't know the names of my great great grandfather on my maternal side, sorry. But my grandfather on my maternal side was Dr. Vairamuthu. And my grandmother was Sivagami Tayar. Sivagami Tayar was her name, maternal side. Sivagami Tayar, Tayar means like mother, but she came from a very aristocratic family, my maternal grandmother. And my paternal grandmother, and my maternal grandfather were brother and sister. So my parents were first cousins. When my mother was born, my father was already 15 years old, and my paternal grandmother went to visit my maternal grandmother when she had her first child. My mom was her first child, and because she was sister-in-law, right? So she went to visit, and she took my father along, and then she declared to my father, "This will be your bride. She will be the one you will marry." But my father turned around and said, "I'm not going to marry a baby." He said, and he pushed the cradle apparently, and he said, "I'm not marrying this baby," and pushed the cradle away. And they all laughed. But 15 years later, he did marry my mother.
He did. I see.
So that was very interesting. In those days, that's what it was. You first got married. The marriages were always arranged, and the first marriages, first lot that they look at is usually the first, suitable bride and bridegroom would be looked at within the immediate family. So they always chose brother's daughter or brother's son. So sisters can marry any of the sisters' children can marry any of the brothers' children. They will be first cousins. They can marry, but not two sisters. Their children, they will not be able to marry. They won't allow that. Or two brothers' children are not allowed. So it's first cousins, meaning brother and sister. Their children can marry each other. So that's the first line of proposals that they would make. Then, if they do not find anybody suitable, then they go a little further out into the family, the extended family, and then into the village. And in those days, very seldom that they would marry outside of the village. It's because they wanted to keep the property and whatever, within the family unit, if they could, because dowries were given in those days, and it was always property, land, you know, jewelry, whatever. But basically, the property had to be kept within the big family circle, and try to keep it within the village. Because if you marry a boy outside the village into another village, then that guy would own a land bank in your village, and that usually is not a done thing. Not
I see.
usually a very happy relation, or they don't really like, the people in the village don't really like to share their property or dissect their property away.
Right, that's fascinating. I think we are beginning to get a glimpse, all right, of the kind of the culture and the social structure of the Ceylonese Tamils in Malaya and Singapore. But can we perhaps now look more at the Ceylonese Tamil community as a whole first, and that will help us to understand, your family as well. So could I understand, maybe, for a lot of the viewers who will not know anything about Ceylonese Tamils, tell us where they are from in Ceylon, and
Okay.
did most of them follow the same kind of migration, brought in by the British to Malaya and
Yes, they
Singapore?
were.
Yeah.
So the Ceylon Tamils come from different parts, not only from the northern territories. They also are slightly on the eastern territories. And there are Ceylon Tamils even in the southern regions, but very few. So as a whole, they are called Ceylon Tamils. Then when you go a little closer to study, the majority of them come from Jaffna. And Jaffna is in the northern territories. And the British, they preferred to bring the Jaffna Tamils and slightly into the eastern province, the Betikalo, and Betikalo particularly, because they had a lot of big missionary schools there. And these schools were English schools that educated these young men. And so they found them suitable. They also trained them in the various sectors, like the surveyors and the overseers and the engineers, as they call them. So, for example, when the British wanted to bring the crew from across there, Birch, who was the commissioner, he then chose certain people to come across. And one of the first ones that came to Singapore was an overseer called Singapore Vitalingam, first recorded person in Singapore. I mean, there were, I'm sure, many more, like how my great-great-grandfather and all were, but the first recorded person was Singapore Vitalingam, who was an overseer, and he had worked with Birch in Ceylon, uh, overseeing a lot of the road buildings, contracts and things like that. So he was chosen and brought across, and quite to the protest of the family, they didn't like the idea of him leaving and coming, because they heard that Singapore was a place where there were a lot of criminals that were brought, and it was a dangerous place, and pirates, and the stories were so easy to scare the family, the relatives. So the grandmother in particular she really protested, but he still insisted that he was coming, and he came, and the grandmother and the family thought he'll never come back, he'll never return. But he did eventually go back. So he was one of the first that came here, first recorded person. Then after that, there was Vinasi Thambi, who was again a person who was working for the PWD. And then there were various other people. But there's one particular person I'd like to mention, which is
Yep.
of great interest to
Mm.
the general whole. And there are two, actually. One was called Arumugam Pillai Anamale Pillai. And this man was a surveyor, and he was brought into colonial Malaya and then into Singapore. Now, he arrived in 1877, and he was brought in by, he worked for Loh at that time, who was also, in charge of the PWD in the settlements in the. So when he came, he then joined. He first worked for the PWD, then he moved across into private practice, and he joined a guy called Lermet, and they started a company where they did a lot of surveys. And if you go into some of the old title deeds, you will see Anamale Pillai Arumugam Pillai's signature on a lot of the title deeds, although it goes back to 1890s or 1880s even. You see a lot of the title deeds. And what's interesting about Anamale Pillai is that he bought a lot of land banks in the Bukit Timah area. At that time, Bukit Timah was known as the Tiger Resort because there were a lot of tigers in that area. And apparently every day, at least 5 or 6 people would be killed by tigers. That's how the story goes. But this man, in his survey, had a great interest in the Bukit Timah region. It was very much a forest at that time. And when he bought those land banks, it was said to be between Farrer Road and Anamale Avenue and Bukit Timah Road and Holland Road. So that's a huge land bank.
Yeah.
And he had a house there. He built a house which is very roughly around the 4th mile, which is very near the Hwa Chong Junior College, around that region.
Right.
Today, I think there is a SP petrol station there. It's around that area that he built his house. His neighbors, how I know that is because his neighbors is CK Tangs, the old CK Tang, the original owner of CK Tang, and that their family, and also my husband's uncle had his house also there. And what is interesting is Anamale Pillai, when the British wanted to develop that whole area, he then said to the British, on one condition, you let me name the roads. And he then, because of his great allegiance to the crown, the British crown, he then named it Duke Road, Duchess Road, Princess of Wales Road. And
Right.
So
Yeah. There was a school named Duchess Road School in that area.
Yes, that's right.
Right.
So that grandfather's story is is very. And then the other one is Namley Avenue, Namley Estate. Now, the British could not fully pronounce his name, and they used to call him Namale. And so instead of Anamale, Namle, and that whole of that Namley Estate was then called Namley Avenue, Namley Crescent, and that sort of thing.
Right.
So there is this man, Anamale, was well known for that area partly being named after him, and partly that he was involved in naming the roads in that area.
Fantastic. I do want to touch on a point you raised, which is their loyalty to the crown, right? So it seems that the British placed a lot of trust, and there was a very strong relationship between the British and the Ceylonese Tamils. What brought that about, you think? How do we explain that?
Say, for example, my father. My father was working for the British administration. He was a civil servant. And he was very, very strong in his allegiance to the British and the British crown. And we were brought up in that very British way as well. And I mean, there was a great respect because I think that was how it was, over generations, that was how they were brought up,
Mm.
To respect Queen Victoria, for example, you know, um, going back in time, Queen Victoria was still alive when my father was born, and then
Mm.
then after that the subsequent royal families. I think still a lot of us, even myself, I still have a lot of you know um,
Mm.
passion about the royal family in Britain
Mm.
more than any other. you know uh, it's something that has been you know steeped into us by the British system that was
Mm.
brought in, you know the old colonial system. I think that was how it was.
Can I ask you historically, what was the percentage of the Ceylonese Tamils among the Indian population?
We are a very small
Mm.
community here.
Mm. Mm.
If you ask me, the reason consensus has not been done, but
You're
it
right.
started with a handful, and it became maybe 2,000, and after that about 5,000, and then
Mm.
maybe about 20,000 now,
Right.
25,000. I can't really quite answer
Sure.
because
Sure.
there's a lot of reasons. See, from 1980 um, onwards, there was another exodus out of Ceylon, of our Ceylon Tamils, because of the ethnic problems.
Mm. Mm. Mm.
So 1980, there was a whole lot of professionals that came this way to Singapore. And then since then, I do notice that there are a lot of young engineers that have come to Singapore and have settled here in various
Mm.
capacities of,
Mm.
you know, development in
Right.
Singapore. Say, for
Yeah.
example, a lot of them work in the MRT or in the, PWD or wherever, public works, wherever. So there are different times, but our lot, or at least I can trace my forefathers back as
Mm.
as
Mm.
far as the
Mm.
1870s
Yeah.
onwards. You know, uh, that is how that's when the British started. They started in a little earlier, but in 1870s is where we can trace the first Ceylonese that came to Singapore.
Mm. Mm. Can I ask you a couple of questions? I have many burning questions to ask you. One of it is obvious one, but I think those of us who are not Ceylonese Tamils or Tamils will not understand well, which is there is a distinction between the Ceylonese Tamils and the Tamils of Tamil Nadu.
Yes.
Yeah. Could you talk about that difference?
Okay.
Mm.
There's a lot of differences and yet similarities.
Mm. Mm.
Uh, we must not forget that there was a time when we were very much a, a community that came out of southern part of India.
Mm.
That's Tamil Nadu, basically, and Kerala. These are the two
Yes.
closest relationships that we can think of.
Mm.
Um, so the Jaffna Tamils have got a lot of similarities with the Keralites
Mm.
in our food and our system, because we are a matriarchal society. So
Okay.
yeah, so that is an interesting aspect. Although we would like to let our men be the dominant persons in our lives, but there is that matriarchal system that we follow, similar to Kerala. But in the in food as well, um, South India,
Mm.
more so with the Chettinad, the
Mm. Mm.
Nagara,
Right.
the Chettiars. Our food is quite similar to theirs. And why I say that is because we have a lot of synergy because of trade. They were also traders. We were also from the
Mm.
trading area. Jaffna was very much, in going back as far as 3 BC, we were already trading with the merchants of Venice, for example. There was evidence of that. There was evidence of the pearls being taken and the gems being taken from this part to be given to King Solomon, for example, by the Queen of Sheba. All this history is there, but it's a matter of, and spice, of course, was the other thing that was so exchanged. So there were similarities between the Chettiars and us. And there's a lot of similarities between the Keralites and us. The only differences are that certain customs, for example, marriages, the way we do our marriages, our ceremonies, our customary practices, there are little nuances that are slightly different from Tamil Nadu and from Kerala. Kerala, the weddings are very short. Like if they tell you come at 10 o'clock, you better go at 10 o'clock because otherwise you miss the actual ceremony because it's finished by 5 minutes,
Right.
very quick. Whereas the Ceylon Tamil wedding is quite long-winded, and there's a lot of different aspects that they follow. What is very interesting as well about the Ceylon Tamils, because don't forget, the Christian missionaries had influenced a lot of the Ceylon Tamils to become Christians. And a lot of them became Christians because they wanted to go into the Christian schools, to be educated. So they changed their religion in order to be able to gain a place in some of the best schools, some of the best Christian schools in Jaffna. Now, there's one thing that I want to note is that although they changed their religion, there was a lot of practices that they followed, like using certain vessels, and the coconut, in the vessel, and the using the light, the oil lights, the thali, for example, which is the chain that they tie for the bride. Like you exchange rings. Instead, they tie this chain. The bridegroom will tie the chain, and on that is a pendant, and that's called a thali. Now we have usually Shiva Linga or something like that on ours, on the Hindu one. But the thali of the Christians has a cross on it. It's exactly the same, except they have a cross. So they still tie the thali as well. So that culturally and in heritage, that has never been let off. They never let go of that practice. They believe in it. And it's very interesting that I had to help a friend of mine in London when her daughter got married, and they were Christians, and she insisted on having all these traditional customs to be followed, which was very much a Hindu custom. So I asked her, and she said, "No, these are customs that we will never let go." She said, because that is part of our birth, right? So we must follow that. But only thing is the religion, we change it to Christianity. That's all. So to me it was of course we do follow the exchanging of rings and all that, because that is something that we have the registered wedding. And so in the church, they do exchange rings. In our Hindu custom, we also exchange ring because the registrar comes and registers the marriage officially as a legal marriage. And he says, okay, do you want to exchange ring? And we do practice that as well. So a little bit of that Western custom is also introduced into our tradition.
That's very interesting. Yeah. Can I ask you, being a matriarchal society, what does that mean? Does that mean that the woman is the head of the household? And how does that translate in practice?
And
Mm,
also, yeah, she's the head of the house and household, and she holds the keys.
right.
So it's, I mean, I just think of it, I think out of the box about how my parents work, for example. My
Mm.
father would bring his whole salary and give it to my mother.
Of course. That is the most important key, right?
Yeah, it is. And she
Yeah.
would keep it. And if he needed money, he would come and ask her.
Mm,
So she would this thing. In those days, in the olden times, there was no banks, right?
right.
So the mother, the matriarch in the house was the banker.
Mm.
And in those old days, there was extended family as well. So when sons married, they brought their wives home. And so there was an extended family of the sons with their wives all in the same household. So it's a large extended family that lived together.
Mm.
Daughters were always given a wing and they went off to their husbands' homes and there they formed their, household there.
Mm.
So when the sons bring their wives, so if there are four sons, four wives are there. But as long as the mother is alive, she holds the key.
Mm.
And then she then will probably pass the key to the eldest daughter-in-law. And they
I
all
see.
brought up in that, when she is no more, the eldest daughter-in-law then becomes the head of the household.
Ah. What about inheritance? Would the inheritance go to the eldest daughter or the eldest son?
Eldest daughter gets,
Mm.
dowry system is like that,
Mm.
where the eldest daughter gets a portion of the inheritance, and she gets it because the parents always feel that they must give the dowry to help take care of her and her welfare, that
Mm.
she lives well and she's taken care of. But a lot of, in the old times, a lot of these dowries were abused by the men's side of the family. Even now, you hear of
Mm.
it.
Mm. Mm.
The husband side of the family, they would demand for it to be taken away and they would abuse it and they would abuse the girl as well. So, um, generally, the idea of the dowry was to be given to the girl to make sure that she, in case something happens to her, that
Mm.
she is still able to sustain. So normally it'd be rice fields, agriculture, because we come from an agricultural society. Our We are by nature agriculturists, So normally rice fields and plantations,
Mm.
maybe coconut plantations or palmera plantations. All these are um, something that the girl can lean back on to be able to sustain the family. Or so that was what the reason was. Then there is the boys don't are not left out. The boys will get a portion of the property as well. So the property that they live in, and maybe one or two other properties that
Mm.
the father would have acquired, would be divided among the males in the family. But the father would also often give a house, you know, cows, for example,
Mm.
in the olden days,
Mm. Yeah.
because milking cows, especially. Um, so, as I said, and land, rice fields, this sort of thing. So it's generally divided between the
Mm.
kids. But the
Right. Right.
daughters do have a right of having a portion of the properties. I mean, usually it's given at the marriage time. That's it.
I see. I
Yeah.
see. Can you tell us about the language, the Tamil? How important is Tamil
Okay,
to?
Tamil is an age old.
Mm.
It's supposed to be, you know, thousands of years old. It's one of the oldest languages, if not the oldest, that is there. And it is a beautiful language that has got a wealth of literature as well that goes with it, and the whole mythology and the whole history of the Tamils is all surrounding it. And the language that the Ceylon Tamils speak, the Ceylon uh, Tamil, is very, very old and still has the very refined Tamil that we sustain and we preserve.
Right.
The Tamil that is spoken in South India has become very colloquialized.
Okay.
We believe that the Tamil in Tamil Nadu has been tainted a little, whereas we still keep the oldest form. The way we speak to other people, we have a refined way of addressing people.
Do you mean it's more like courtly, or it's more sort of scholarly?
Yes.
Right.
English language,
Yeah.
the Queen's English and the Cockney, or the village. So I shouldn't say village. The colloquial way in which they use they have actually, some of them have actually spoiled the language by using anglicized words or a bit of rough language, especially from the villages. Whereas in Jaffna, they are known to have always preserved the refined Tamil. And in Singapore, it's very interesting that in the schools, Tamil is a very important language, which is part of the school curriculum. So the Tamil children learn Tamil as a second language. But the Indian Tamil and the Ceylon Tamil is different. So the children from Ceylon who have come here and who learn Tamil in the Singapore schools at first find it very difficult because the terms that are used are slightly different,
I see.
But eventually they have to condone to speaking in the Indian Tamil, the way it is spoken here. Quite often the Indians don't understand the terms that we use. The Indian Tamil sometimes say, what did you mean by that? And we then have to say, okay, this is the equal word for it. It's like Indonesian Malay and Malayan Malaysian Malay. How I am amazed by it, because when I now have an Indonesian helper and I speak Malay. So I speak Malaysian Malay. And when I say certain spices to her or something like that, she frowns at me and she looks at me and she wonders what I'm talking about. Like, for example, when I say candle nut, I say buah keras. And she says, what's that? And I said, you don't know buah keras? And I'm sort of amazed.
Yes.
And then I have to look at a picture and show her. And she, Kamiri, she says. And I go,
totally different.
I'm learning a new language from her, So this is how it is. The best way of describing the difference in the language is that the Malays in Malaya and the Malays in Indonesia speak slightly different, Malay. Same as the Malays in Singapore.
Right. Great.
And we say politely nanga, ninga, that sort of thing. Whereas they say ni, nan, that sort of thing, which we find is rough. You and I, that is what it means in English. But we have a more refined way. We say nanga, ninga, whereas the Indian Tamils will say ni, nan, and we say you should never say ni, because we say that it's a bit sort of rough. You should be more polite, so we say ninga, nanga. But for the Indian Tamils, it's very polite, ni, nan, it's more sort of used by them. They find it comfortable. So when we say ninga, nanga, they sort of oh, are you Ceylon Tamil? And we say, yes, we are.
I see.
That's how we identify by the language. The way though the Tamil is Tamil, but
Mm.
the certain words and all that are slightly different.
Yeah, the subtleties, yeah.